August 12, 1944. Tokyo, Imperial General Headquarters. The air is thick with humidity, pressing against the ceiling like an invisible weight. Electric fans churn lazily, failing to provide relief. A low murmur of officers moves through the corridors, punctuated by the distant rumble of artillery from the Pacific Islands. Smoke from incense coils drifts in the corners of the room, mingling with the faint scent of sweat and ink on maps spread across polished wooden tables. Admiral Somu Toyoda, chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy General Staff, stands over a large map illuminated by a single hanging bulb. His face is pale, eyes narrowed, lips pressed tightly. Across the table, Army planners shuffle reports and dispatches, each more alarming than the last. Telegrams from airfield commanders describe the same relentless pattern. B-29 superfortresses, flying higher and faster than any Japanese fighter could intercept, dropping incendiary bombs on urban centers with surgical precision. Colonel Masataka Kawashima, an air defense strategist, points at the map, tracing the flight paths with a trembling finger. "Our interceptors. They cannot reach them," he reportedly states, voice low but steady. Around him, other commanders nod grimly, the weight of inevitability settling over the room like a fog. The room is silent for a moment, broken only by the scratching of pens on paper. No one speaks of surrender, not yet, but every officer knows, without saying it aloud, that the war in the air has shifted irrevocably. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, they are no longer safe. Admiral Toyoda straightens, his knuckles whitening on the map's edge. He doesn't move, doesn't speak. But the question hangs in the thick, stifling air. How can Japan stop an enemy that strikes from above, untouchable, unstoppable, and devastatingly precise? By mid-1944, Japan's air defenses were stretched to their breaking point. Across the Pacific, the United States had established air bases on the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, bringing the Japanese home islands within striking distance of the new B-29 superfortress. These aircraft were unlike anything the Imperial Japanese Army or Navy had faced. Capable of flying at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet, carrying payloads of up to 20,000 pounds of bombs, and equipped with advanced radar navigation systems. In Tokyo, Admiral Toyoda and his counterparts had spent months analyzing intelligence reports and aerial reconnaissance photos. Fighter aircraft like the Mitsubishi Kai-67 and the Nakajima Kai-84 could reach the edge of the B-29's operational altitude, but only in exceptional circumstances. And even then, their armament was insufficient to inflict significant damage. Early engagements had demonstrated a brutal reality. Attempts to intercept the superfortresses were costly and largely ineffective. Planes were lost, pilots killed, and cities remained vulnerable. Meanwhile, the Army's Air General Headquarters prepared incendiary bombing defense plans. Anti-aircraft batteries were repositioned, radar stations expanded, and kamikaze-style intercept attempts considered. Yet each strategy faced the same fundamental problem. The B-29s were simply too fast, too high, and too resilient. Reports from field commanders detailed the devastating firebombings of smaller Japanese cities like Yawata, revealing the destructive potential that awaited larger urban centers. The Japanese leadership faced not only a military challenge but a psychological one. The home islands had been considered untouchable, protected by the vast Pacific and decades of complacent planning. Now, enemy aircraft appeared as shadows over every industrial hub, every civilian neighborhood, leaving no sanctuary. Within the general headquarters, discussions were tense, punctuated by the occasional raised voice, the rustle of paper maps, and whispered calculations of potential casualties. Admiral Toyoda, fully aware of the strategic stakes, reportedly convened a series of emergency meetings. Army officers argued for dispersal of industrial targets, Navy planners called for mass fighter intercepts, and air defense strategists debated radar improvements. Yet every option carried severe limitations. Intelligence reports suggested the B-29 campaign could escalate, targeting not just industry but the civilian population, with incendiary bombs designed to ignite entire city blocks. In this climate of mounting urgency, the Japanese command began to confront an uncomfortable truth. Conventional defenses, no matter how meticulously planned, might never be enough. The B-29s represented not just a tactical threat but a symbolic one: the reach of American air power, the inevitability of modern warfare, and the vulnerability of a nation once considered secure. Within these walls of command, the first whispers of inevitability took hold, shaping discussions that would determine the course of Japan's home front for the rest of the war. August 13, 1944. Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. The air is stifling, oppressive, as if the walls themselves press in on the assembled commanders. Admiral Toyota stands at the head of the table, fingers drumming lightly on the edge of a meticulously drawn map of the Japanese home islands. Around him, generals and colonels shift uneasily, eyes flicking from one report to the next. Colonel Kawashima leans forward, voice low but steady. Our fighters cannot reach them consistently. Their altitude is beyond operational limits. Even the Ki-84s are outmatched. We are losing planes faster than we can replace them. The words hang in the room like smoke. Officers exchange grim glances. The stark reality has begun to crystallize. Lieutenant General Korchika Anami, Army Minister, reportedly states, "We cannot defend Tokyo, Osaka, or Nagoya effectively. Every airfield is vulnerable. Every city is at risk." His voice carries the weight of inevitability, echoing off the polished wood panels. Others nod silently, unwilling, or perhaps unable to offer solutions. Admiral Toyota finally speaks, measured, controlled, but his knuckles whitening on the map betrays tension. The enemy aircraft strike with impunity. If this continues, our industrial capacity will collapse, and with it, our ability to sustain the war. There is a pause, deliberate and heavy. Each officer understands the unspoken meaning. Japan may soon face the impossible choice between continued resistance and catastrophic civilian loss. Reports from radar stations arrive sporadically, each one confirming the same pattern. B-29 formations approach with unerring accuracy, dropping incendiaries across entire districts. Officers begin to recount previous raids in quiet, almost reverent tones, noting how firestorms consumed neighborhoods and factories alike. The conversation shifts to potential responses, but options are limited, desperate, and increasingly theoretical. A young staff officer, voice barely above a whisper, says, "We are fighting shadows in the sky. The superfortresses are untouchable." No one disputes him. Around the table, faces pale, commanders confront the same terrifying reality simultaneously. The B-29s have redefined the battlefield. For the first time in decades, Japan's military leadership experiences genuine helplessness. Their calculations, strategies, and traditions of planning falter under the weight of technological supremacy. In that room, amid the rustle of papers and the hum of fans, the realization sinks in. They cannot stop the B-29s. Not today, not tomorrow, perhaps not ever. The hours following the critical meeting are tense, almost surreal. Orders ripple through the Imperial General Headquarters with urgency, yet each directive carries a sense of desperation rather than confidence. Anti-aircraft batteries are repositioned around Tokyo, Osaka, and other major cities, while fighter squadrons are scrambled in increasingly risky interception attempts. Yet every operation meets the same harsh reality. The B-29s evade, outmaneuver, and strike with precision. Field commanders report back in real time. "We intercepted 10 bombers, 4 returned damaged," writes Colonel Masataka Kawashima in one dispatch. "The remainder completed their run unopposed. Civilian casualties are high, industrial targets destroyed." The terse, clinical language of the report belies the human toll it documents. Soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, struggle to maintain discipline. Civilians, aware of the bombings but uncertain of scale, cling to hope that Tokyo's defenses will somehow hold. Within headquarters, the atmosphere oscillates between frantic planning and grim resignation. Admiral Toyota convenes smaller strategy sessions, consulting with Navy and Army planners. Each scenario is dissected, each proposal weighed. Some officers advocate dispersal of industry, relocating factories to remote regions. Others suggest experimental anti-aircraft tactics. Yet each solution is constrained by time, resources, and the relentless pace of American air raids. By evening, the impact becomes evident. Communications intercepts reveal American confidence in their campaign. Reconnaissance confirms the destruction of key urban sectors. Propaganda efforts attempt to mask the gravity of the situation, portraying the raids as isolated incidents, manageable and temporary. In private, however, commanders acknowledge the scale of the threat. B-29 operations are systematic, sustained, and strategically devastating. Reports circulate of civilian authorities struggling to coordinate firefighting and emergency services. Hospitals overflow, infrastructure falters, and morale wanes. The Japanese leadership, long accustomed to centralized command and careful orchestration, confronts chaos that cannot be easily mitigated. The contrast between their meticulous planning and the chaotic reality of the air raids underscores the stark, unyielding truth. The superfortresses have forced Japan onto the defensive, shifting the war's momentum inexorably toward the Allies. The night ends not with resolution, but with planning and quiet dread. Orders are issued, countermeasures attempted, yet every officer understands the silent, unspoken reality. Conventional tactics are insufficient, and the war in the air has already been lost. The realization that the B-29s could not be stopped reverberated far beyond Tokyo's Imperial General Headquarters. Strategically, it marked a turning point in Japan's air defense doctrine. The once vaunted belief in invulnerability of the home islands shattered, replaced by an urgent acknowledgement of vulnerability. Industrial output, already strained by the ongoing conflict, suffered devastating losses as firebombing raids intensified over the following months. Factories producing aircraft, ammunition, and essential war materials were systematically destroyed, crippling Japan's ability to replenish its forces. Historians later note that the B-29 campaign was both psychological and physical warfare. The Japanese command, accustomed to meticulous planning and hierarchical decision-making, faced an enemy whose technological superiority rendered traditional tactics obsolete. Military leaders wrestled with the limits of human agency against the cold efficiency of mechanized warfare. Admiral Toyota and his colleagues reportedly contemplated radical measures, dispersing industry, mounting kamikaze-style interception campaigns, and prioritizing civilian evacuations. But even these were insufficient to counter the relentless bombing strategy. The long-term impact extended to the civilian population. Cities such as Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka endured massive casualties and destruction, reshaping urban landscapes and community life. Emergency services, medical infrastructure, and transportation networks were overwhelmed, creating a cycle of devastation that compounded with each successive raid. The psychological toll on both civilians and military leaders fostered a pervasive sense of inevitability. Japan was fighting a war increasingly dictated by the capabilities of its enemies, rather than its own planning or strategy. On a broader scale, the B-29 raids influenced Japanese strategic thinking for the remainder of the war. Commanders became reactive, constantly adjusting defenses to the next attack, rather than implementing proactive campaigns. The inability to neutralize the superfortresses highlighted a profound technological and tactical gap, one that underscored the shifting nature of modern warfare. Scholars now view these campaigns as pivotal in demonstrating how air power could decisively shape outcomes, forcing Japan into an increasingly defensive an ultimately unsustainable position. By the war's end, the legacy of those critical weeks in 1944 was clear. The B-29s had transformed the Japanese strategic landscape, revealing the limits of command, technology, and morale. For the commanders who had first confronted this reality, the recognition that they could not stop the enemy became a defining moment, an enduring testament to the intersection of innovation, human decision-making, and the inexorable march of history. As the smoke cleared over the Japanese home islands, the human cost of the B-29 campaign became impossible to ignore. Commanders, officers, and soldiers alike faced the grim reality that technological superiority could render meticulous planning powerless. Admiral Toyoda's knuckles had long since relaxed on the map, yet the weight of those decisions lingered, etched into the expressions of all who had gathered in that stifling room. In retrospect, historians note the stark contrast between expectation and reality. Japan had entered the conflict with confidence in its air defenses and industrial resilience, yet the B-29s exposed vulnerabilities that could not be repaired through strategy alone. For the men at headquarters, every calculation, every contingency plan was now colored by a sobering truth. War was no longer merely a contest of courage and tactics, but increasingly a contest of technology and adaptation. Yet beyond strategy and machinery, the story remains profoundly human. Officers wrestled with responsibility for civilian lives, pilots grappled with the impossibility of interception, and citizens endured firestorms that reshaped cities and memories alike. The moment of realization, the acknowledgement that they could not stop the B-29s, was not simply a military defeat. It was a confrontation with limits, mortality, and the harsh unpredictability of modern war. For contemporary observers, these events serve as a reminder. History is defined as much by human reaction to extraordinary pressures as by the movements of armies or machines. In those hours of despair and decision, Japan's leaders confronted an uncomfortable truth that resonates beyond the battlefield. The measure of leadership is not only in command, but in facing what cannot be controlled, and in making choices under the shadow of inevitability. The B-29 raids were more than a technological triumph. They were a testament to the profound, often tragic, interplay between human decision-making and the relentless forces of history. And in that interplay, the voices of those commanders, their doubts, and their decisions continue to echo across time.